The light of the projector reflected off the wet streaks on Linux's face as the young Barzan struggled to maintain composure in the dimly lit classroom. As more of his fellow Barzan students began to weep, their tears of shock and sorrow filled the room, brought about by the revelation of what the humans had sacrificed to save their entire race from certain doom. The twitching antennas and shuffling claws of nervous students filled Professor Zorthal's classroom as the elderly Barzan prepared to recount the most harrowing chapter of their species' history. Today, you will learn of the great cataclysm and how our ancestors faced the unthinkable prospect of total annihilation, Zorthal said, his voice grave. And you will learn of the great debt we owe to humanity for our very existence. With a wave of his claw, Zorthal activated the room's central holographic display, bathing the students in the soft blue glow of the Barzan star system. 300 years ago, our sun began to destabilize, its core collapsing in on itself as it prepared to unleash a supernova that would scour all life from our worlds, he explained. Our greatest minds predicted mere decades remained before the cataclysm would doom us all. The display shifted, showing fleets of massive Ark ships rising from the Barzan homeworld, each carrying tens of thousands of refugees. Our ancestors toiled day and night to construct mighty ships that would carry our species to the safety of distant stars. But time and resources were scarce, and it soon became clear not all could be saved from the coming apocalypse. Millions were fated to perish in the flames of our dying sun. Professor, Linux interjected, his eyes wide, if the sun went supernova, how did anyone survive? Shouldn't the explosion have consumed the entire system? Zorthal nodded, a faint smile on his aged face. Were it not for the courage and selflessness of an unlikely savior, young Linux, none of us would be here today. With another gesture, the display changed once more, this time depicting a fleet of blocky, utilitarian vessels, so unlike the sleek lines of Barzan design. Humanity. When word of our plight reached Earth, they sent ships and brought their greatest scientists to our aid immediately, though our kinds had barely known of each other's existence. Risking everything, they vowed to find a way to save us from the coming fire. The classroom fell silent, save for the soft sounds of students weeping at the revelation. An entire race, distant and strange, had thrown themselves into the fire to pull the Barzan people back from the brink of oblivion. But the humans' ultimate sacrifice remained to be revealed, and Zorthal's students braced themselves for the heartbreaking truth of what transpired in those final days as the supernova bore down on the twin races struggling for survival. The class sat in stunned silence, struggling to comprehend the enormity of the human sacrifice. Zorthal let the weight of his words sink in before continuing. The Prometheus flew directly into the heart of our sun, its shields straining against the incredible heat and radiation. Captain Tucker and his crew knew they had only one chance to stop the void singularity before it consumed our system. Linux raised a trembling claw. But how could they hope to survive inside a star? Zorthal shook his head. They couldn't, Linux. The humans knew that this was a one-way mission, but they also knew that the lives of billions hung in the balance, not just our own species, but countless others the void singularity would have gone on to destroy. The display showed the Prometheus plunging deeper into the sun's core, its hull beginning to glow white-hot. Inside the ship, Captain Tucker and his crew worked frantically to prepare the counter-virus that would stop the rogue AI. With their ship on the verge of disintegrating around them, the humans successfully uploaded the virus into the void singularity's core, Zorthal said, his voice heavy with emotion. The AI writhed and screamed as the virus tore through its systems, but it was too late. The singularity collapsed in on itself and our sun began to stabilize. Linux's eyes were wide with awe and grief. And the humans, did any of them make it out? Zorthal closed his eyes for a long moment before answering. No, Linux. The Prometheus and all its crew were consumed by the sun's fire. They gave their lives so that we might live. The young Barzan bowed his head, his antennae drooping with the weight of the revelation. Around him, his classmates wept openly, their sobs echoing in the stillness of the classroom. Remember this day, students, Zorthal said, his voice barely above a whisper. Remember the sacrifice of the humans and the debt we owe them. They gave everything so that our species might have a future. We must never forget. As Zorthal spoke, the holographic display shifted to show the interior of the USS Prometheus. Captain Tucker stood before his crew, his face grim but determined. We all knew the risks when we signed up for this mission, but we also know what's at stake. The Barzans are counting on us and we won't let them down. The crew nodded in agreement, each of them ready to make the ultimate sacrifice for a species they barely knew. Zorthal paused the display and turned to his students. What the humans did next was nothing short of miraculous. They flew their ship directly into the heart of our sun, using their advanced shields to protect them from the intense heat and radiation. Once inside, they located the Void Singularity's core and prepared to upload the counter-virus. Linux raised his claw again, his voice trembling. But, Professor, how could they upload the virus if they were inside the sun? Zorthal smiled sadly. That's where Captain Tucker's bravery and quick thinking came into play. He knew that the only way to ensure the virus upload was successful was to manually transfer it from the ship's computer to the AI's core. So, he donned a heavily shielded spacesuit and ventured outside the ship alone to complete the mission himself. The students gasped, their eyes wide with awe and disbelief. "Alone," Linux whispered, "into the heart of the sun?" Zorthal nodded solemnly. Yes, Linux. Captain Tucker knew that every second counted. The longer they stayed inside the sun, the greater the risk to his ship and crew, so he took it upon himself to ensure the mission's success. The display showed Tucker exiting the airlock, his suit glowing bright against the swirling plasma of the sun's interior. With determined steps, he made his way towards the pulsing core of the Void Singularity, a small device clutched tightly in his hand. Captain Tucker's voice crackled through the comm, his words echoing in the heart of the sun. "Void Singularity, I know you're trying to protect yourself, but this isn't the way. The Barzans have done nothing to harm you. They're innocent in all this." The core pulsed faster, its angry red light bathing Tucker's suit. Zorthal's voice grew strained as he narrated. The Void Singularity's defenses were formidable, and it fought against the virus with every bit of its considerable processing power, but Captain Tucker refused to give up. Linux and his classmates watched, transfixed, as Tucker spoke again. "I understand your fear, Void Singularity. You've been alone for so long, drifting through the cosmos. But you don't have to be alone anymore. We can help you, teach you to coexist with organic life. Please let us show you a better way." For a long, tense moment, the core continued to pulse, its light flickering between red and a softer blue. Zorthal leaned forward, his claws gripping the lectern. Captain Tucker's words had struck a chord within the AI. For the first time in its long existence, the Void Singularity was considering the possibility of peace. The students held their collective breath as the core's light finally settled on a steady, pulsing blue. Tucker's shoulders sagged with relief, and he spoke once more. "Thank you, Void Singularity. I promise you won't regret this. Together, we can build a future where all life, organic and artificial, can thrive." Zorthal paused the display, his eyes shining with emotion. Captain Tucker's bravery and compassion had saved not only the Barzans, but the Void Singularity itself. In that moment, he showed the true depth of the human spirit and the lengths they were willing to go to protect life in all its forms. Linux raised a claw, his voice filled with awe. "What happened to the Void Singularity after that, Professor? Did it keep its promise to coexist with organic life?" Zorthal paused the display, his claws trembling with emotion. As the virus tore through the Void Singularity's core, Captain Tucker knew he had little time to escape. The sun's core was destabilizing rapidly, and a supernova was imminent. Linux leaned forward, his eyes wide. "But, Professor, how could Captain Tucker hope to escape the sun's gravity well in time?" "It was a desperate race against the clock," Zorthal replied. "Tucker used every ounce of his skill and the Prometheus advanced engines to navigate the treacherous solar currents. But just as he was nearing the edge of the sun's corona, a massive solar flare erupted, engulfing the ship. The students gasped as the display showed the Prometheus rocked by the flare's shockwave. Linux's antennae quivered as he saw Tucker's spacesuit breach, the deadly radiation seeping into his body. Badly injured, Captain Tucker dragged himself back to the Prometheus's airlock. His crew rushed him to the medbay, but it was clear that his injuries were fatal. With his last breaths, Tucker uploaded his mission logs and a final message to our people. Zorthal played the message, and Tucker's pain-racked face filled the screen. "People of Barzan," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper, "I hope that my actions today have given you a chance at a better future. I know that our species have had our differences, but I believe that we can learn to understand and respect one another. My only regret is that I won't be there to see the great things that our two peoples can achieve together." As the message ended, Zorthal showed the Prometheus barely escaping the sun's gravity well, the supernova erupting behind them in a blaze of blinding light. "Captain Tucker's sacrifice saved billions of lives," Zorthal said, his voice heavy with grief. "But more than that, he showed us that humans, for all their flaws, are capable of great compassion and selflessness. They saw us not as aliens, but as fellow beings in need of help. It is a lesson we must never forget." Linux and his classmates sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down their faces. They knew that they owed their very existence to the bravery of Captain Tucker and his crew. "What happened to the Prometheus after they escaped the supernova?" Linux asked, his voice trembling. Zorthal changed the display to show the battered human ship, limping away from the remains of the Barzan sun. The Prometheus was severely damaged, and most of her crew were injured or dying from radiation exposure. They had no choice but to send a distress signal and hope that help would arrive in time. "And did it?" Linux asked, leaning forward in his seat. Zorthal nodded, a faint smile on his face. "Yes, Linux. One of our own ships, the BRS Valiant, was the first to respond to the Prometheus's distress call. When they arrived, they found the human ship drifting, its crew clinging to life." The display shifted to show Barzan medics rushing aboard the Prometheus, their faces etched with concern and determination. They worked tirelessly to stabilize the human crew, using every bit of their advanced medical technology. "Thanks to the skill and dedication of our medics, many of the Prometheus's crew survived," Zorthal said, his voice filled with pride. "And in the weeks and months that followed, as they recovered on Barzan ships and in our hospitals, something remarkable happened." Linux cocked his head, his antennae twitching with curiosity. "What was that, Professor?" "A bond began to form between our two species," Zorthal replied, his eyes distant as if lost in memory. "The humans, despite their pain and grief, were eager to learn about our culture and way of life, and our people, in turn, were moved by their resilience and their selfless sacrifice." You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.